The story opens in 1954, where the hills of Virginia are painted in shades of copper and gold, and the air smells of crisp apples and burning leaves. The gentle hum of a distant tractor provides a rhythmic backdrop to the quiet afternoon as the sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long and soft shadows across the rolling meadows where the grass sways in a lazy dance. Mr. Henderson sits on his weathered porch in a high-backed rocking chair that creaks with a steady and comforting cadence. He watches the golden light filter through the ancient oak trees that have stood as silent sentinels for generations. The world feels still and safe as the warmth of the fading day settles into the timber of the old farmhouse. A light breeze carries the scent of pine needles and dried hay from the barn, where the swallows are tucking themselves away for the night. There is no rush in this place, only the slow passage of time, marked by the lengthening shadows and the cooling air. The gravel driveway stretches out like a pale ribbon, leading toward the main road where rarely a car passes. The silence is profound and deep, like a heavy velvet blanket being pulled over the landscape. Henderson closes his eyes for a moment, listening to the crickets beginning their evening song in the tall weeds near the fence line. He thinks about the chores finished and the wood stacked neatly for the coming winter. The smell of wood smoke begins to drift from a neighbor's chimney far across the valley, adding a touch of silver to the darkening blue of the sky. Everything is in its proper place, and the earth feels solid and reliable beneath his feet. He remembers the way the mist clings to the valley floor in the early mornings, looking like a sea of white cotton. Today has been a long and peaceful day, filled with small tasks and quiet reflections. The rocking chair continues its slow movement, back and forth, like a pendulum of a grandfather clock that never tires. He notices a small patch of moss growing on the edge of the stone steps, green and soft like a tiny forest. The clouds above are streaked with violets and pale pink, fading slowly into a deep indigo as the first stars begin to blink into existence. There is a sense of immense space and quietude here, away from the noise of the bustling cities. The air grows cooler now, touching his skin with a gentle freshness that invites deep and slow breaths. He can hear the distant murmur of the creek as it flows over smooth stones, worn down by centuries of water. The water moves with a constant and melodic gurgle that never changes its tune. It is a sound that has lulled many generations to sleep in this valley. The old truck parked in the yard reflects the last of the light, its chrome bumper shining softly like a dull mirror. The tires rest firmly on the earth, settled and unmoving after a day of work. Inside the house, the clock on the mantel ticks with a soft and muffled thud that echoes the heartbeat of the home. The floorboards are thick and sturdy, holding the memories of many footsteps within their grain. A cast-iron stove sits in the kitchen, radiating a lingering heat from the afternoon's tea. The curtains hang still and heavy at the windows, blocking out the encroaching darkness of the woods. Every corner of the room is filled with a soft and hazy light that blurs the edges of the furniture. It is a time for resting and letting go of the day's worries as the night takes hold of the world. The trees whisper to one another in the wind, a soft rustling sound like pages of an old book being turned. There is nothing that needs to be done now, only the simple act of being present in this quiet moment. The stars are becoming more numerous now, filling the sky with a distant and cold fire that feels protective and grand. The Milky Way stretches across the heavens like a dusty path leading to nowhere and everywhere at once. Henderson feels the weight of his limbs becoming heavy and relaxed, as if he were sinking into the soft earth itself. The wind, he bends his knees slowly, feeling the familiar ache of years gone by, and peers into the dark recesses of the wheel well. The smell of grease and old oil is heavy and familiar, reminding him of decades spent under the hoods of machines. There, nestled against the cold iron of the frame, is a small ball of fur shivering with a rhythmic intensity. Henderson reaches out a calloused hand, moving with a deliberate slowness so as not to startle the creature. His fingers brush against something soft and dusty, and he feels the frantic heartbeat of a life much smaller than his own. He murmurs words in a low and gravelly tone that has no edges, only soft curves of sound meant to soothe. The kitten is a patchwork of orange and white, looking like a fallen leaf that had been caught in the machinery. With a gentle tug, he frees the little stowaway from its hiding place near the axle. The kitten is incredibly light, almost weightless, like a handful of dandelion fluff. He cradles it against his flannel shirt, feeling the tiny claws snagging on the fabric in a desperate attempt to find stability. He walks toward the porch, his boots making a dull thudding sound on the packed dirt of the yard. The sun is beginning to dip lower, turning the horizon into a soft wash of apricot and lavender. The air is perfectly still, as if the world is holding its breath to watch this small moment of kindness. He enters the kitchen, where the linoleum floor is cool beneath his feet, and the clock on the wall ticks with a heavy and reliable thud. Martha is there, her apron smelling of flour and cinnamon, as she turns from the counter with a look of soft surprise. They do not need many words to understand one another after 40 years of shared sunsets. She fetches a saucer from the cupboard, the ceramic clinking softly against the countertop like a distant bell. The sound of the milk pouring is a smooth and liquid hiss as it fills the small dish. They place the saucer on the floor and watch as the kitten moves with shaky and uncertain steps toward the white pool. The sound of the kitten lapping is a rhythmic and tiny splashing that fills the quiet room with a sense of immense peace. Outside, the shadows of the apple trees grow longer, stretching across the lawn to touch the edge of the barn. The wind chimes on the porch move just enough to create a single and silver note that hangs in the air. Henderson sits in his wooden chair and feels the tension leaving his neck and shoulders as he watches the small life thrive. The room is filled with a hazy and golden light that makes every speck of dust look like a wandering star. He thinks about the truck and the miles they travel today, unaware of the passenger clinging to the steel. It is a quiet wonder how things find their way to where they belong. The afternoon fades into a deeper blue, and the first crickets begin to chirp under the porch steps. Their song is a repetitive and hypnotic drone that seems to lower the temperature of the room. Martha sits across from him, and the only sound is the steady breathing of two people and one small cat. The world outside is vast and complicated, but here in this kitchen, everything is simple and settled. The refrigerator hums a low and constant bass note that provides a foundation for the silence. The kitten finishes the milk and begins to clean its paws with a focused and repetitive motion that is mesmerizing to behold. Its tiny tongue moves in a steady pattern over and over until the fur is smooth and the dust of the road is gone. Henderson feels his eyelids becoming heavy as the warmth of the house wraps around him like a heavy wool blanket. The memory of the war and the noise of the world feels very far away, like a dream that happened to someone else. Here, there is only the scent of pine and the slow passage of the clock's hand. The kitten eventually finds a patch of rug where the fading sun has left a square of warmth and curls into a tight and perfect circle.
Chassis to the soft amber light of the garage is slow and seamless. He sits on the floor for a moment, cradling the orange kitten against his thick flannel shirt, where the scent of laundry soap and wood smoke offers a new kind of comfort. The kitten lets out a sound so faint it is like the snapping of a dry twig in a distant forest. Henderson stands up with a deliberate and careful motion, his joints moving with a soft and predictable creak that echoes the age of the house itself. He walks toward the kitchen door, his boots making a rhythmic and hollow thud on the wooden porch steps. The screen door opens with the familiar whine of its spring and closes with a soft click that signals the beginning of a safe evening. Inside the farmhouse, the air is heavy with the aroma of slow simmering stew and dried herbs hanging from the rafters. Martha is there, moving with a quiet grace as she prepares the evening tea, her footsteps making no sound on the worn linoleum. She looks at the tiny creature in his hands, and her eyes soften like the glow of a dying hearth. She reaches for a soft cotton towel that has been warmed by the proximity of the stove and wraps the kitten in it, creating a small cocoon of safety. The kitchen clock on the wall ticks with a heavy and hypnotic cadence, marking the passage of seconds that feel as long as minutes. They sit together at the sturdy oak table while the kitten begins to emerge from its shell of fear. The sound of a saucer being placed on the table is a muffled and ceramic chime that resonates through the quiet room. Milk is poured with a slow and steady stream, making a gentle splashing sound that is the only music they need. The kitten begins to lap the milk, its tiny tongue moving in a repetitive and soothing pattern that draws the mind into a state of focus and calm. Outside the window, the Virginia landscape is beginning to settle under a blanket of twilight, where the greens of the trees turn into deep shades of slate and navy. The wind has died down to a mere whisper, and the leaves of the old maple tree remain perfectly still against the darkening sky. A single cricket begins its rhythmic chirping under the window ledge, a steady and unchanging beat that acts as a metronome for the world. Henderson leans back in his chair and feels the weight of his own body sinking into the cushions as the warmth of the room settles over him. He thinks of the long road and the many miles the truck has traveled today, and how remarkable it is that such a small thing survived the journey. Life is full of these quiet miracles that happen in the shadows, in the grease of the everyday world. The kitten is now full and warm, its orange fur starting to fluff out as it dries under the gentle heat of the kitchen. It begins to purr, a sound so low and constant that it feels like the vibration of the earth itself, humming a lullaby. The purr flows through the table and into Henderson's arms, acting as a conduit for a deep and ancient peace. The evening continues to grow deeper, and the light in the kitchen is dimmed to a soft and golden haze that blurs the edges of the jars on the shelves. Martha's knitting needles click together with a faint and rhythmic metallic sound, providing a soft counterpoint to the ticking clock. Every sound in the house is part of a larger symphony of stillness that invites the mind to let go of the day's burdens. The fields outside are silent, and the cattle have long since settled in the lee of the hill where the grass is thick and soft. The stars are appearing one by one in the vast and silent dome of the sky, looking down with a steady and indifferent beauty. There is a sense of immense time stretching out in all directions, making the present moment feel precious and enclosed. The kitten has found a spot on the rug near the radiator and has curled into a perfect and motionless circle. Its breathing is so shallow and regular that it becomes the very definition of rest. Henderson follows the rhythm of that breathing, feeling his own lungs grows into a comforting hum. He places the kitten on a soft flannel cloth on the wooden table, where the grain of the oak shows decades of family meals and quiet conversations. The kitten is covered in a fine gray dust from the road, but its eyes are bright and curious as the fear begins to dissolve in the warmth of the room. Henderson watches as Martha pours a small amount of warm milk into a shallow china saucer, the liquid hitting the surface with a soft and rhythmic splashing sound. They both stand in silence, watching the kitten take its first tentative laps, the sound of its tiny tongue against the milk being the only noise in the large and peaceful kitchen. The clock on the mantel in the next room strikes the hour with a deep and resonant tone that vibrates through the floorboards like a heartbeat. It is a slow and deliberate sound that reminds them there is no hurry in this life, only the steady progression of the night. The kitchen is filled with a soft and amber light from the lamps, casting long and gentle shadows that move slowly as the evening progresses. Henderson sinks into his favorite chair, the wood groaning softly under his weight in a way that feels like a greeting. He watches the kitten begin to clean itself, its movements repetitive and focused as it licks its paws and wipes its face over and over again. The repetition is hypnotic, like the movement of a pendulum or the flow of a distant river. His mind begins to drift to the many engines he has repaired in his life, the roar of the planes and the vibration of the steel. But now all he wants is this profound and heavy silence. The world outside is fading into a deep indigo blue, and the stars are beginning to emerge in the vast and silent sky above the mountains.
Each star is a distant and steady point of light, offering a sense of permanence and peace to the landscape below. He breathes in deeply the scent of the house, which is a mixture of lavender and old books and the lingering warmth of the day's baking. His breathing becomes slower and deeper, matching the quiet rhythm of the house and the sleeping kitten on the rug. The radiator in the corner gives a small and friendly hiss as the heat circulates through the pipes, a sound that has lulled them to sleep for many winters. He thinks about the 20 miles of road the kitten traveled and how every mile led to this specific moment of rest. It is a thought that is as comforting as a heavy wool blanket pulled up to the chin on a cold night. The shadows on the wall are soft and blurry, having no sharp edges to distract the eye or the mind. He feels the muscles in his arms and legs becoming heavy and relaxed, as if they were made of the same ancient stone as the foundation of the house. The silence of the countryside is not empty, but full of the softest sounds of nature, like the rustle of a dry leaf or the distant call of an owl. These sounds do not break the stillness, but rather emphasize how deep and safe it is. The kitten has finished its grooming and is now settled into a tight and perfect circle of orange fur, its sides rising and falling in a rhythmic motion that is the very essence of peace. Henderson closes his eyes for a moment and sees the long and winding roads of Virginia stretching out under a golden sun. But the image is hazy and distant, like a photograph seen through a soft veil. He is here now, in the stillness of the evening, where the only task is to rest and to listen to the breath of the house. The ticking of the clock becomes a background hum that fades in and out of his consciousness, like a radio station from a faraway city. The warmth of the kitchen is a physical presence that wraps around him and invites him to let go of the last remnants of the day. He feels himself sinking into the chair as if he were floating on a calm and dark lake where the water is still and the air is cool. There are no waves and no wind, only the vast and silent expanse of the night. The memory of the grease-stained truck and the hard metal of the chassis is gone, replaced by the softness of the flannel and the warmth.
Room, she pours the milk into a shallow, white saucer, and the ceramic makes a soft clinking sound against the table like a distant bell. The kitten is placed gently near the saucer, its tiny nose twitching as it recognizes the scent of nourishment and warmth. The sound of the kitten lapping is a tiny and wet rhythm that is the only sound in the house for a long and peaceful moment. Henderson leans back in his chair and feels the tension of the day melting away from his neck and shoulders as he watches the small life thrive. He thinks about the vastness of the world outside and how this one small creature found its way to a safe harbor in the middle of a cold night. The clock on the wall ticks with a heavy and muffled thud, each second feeling like a slow and gentle pulse. Outside, the crickets are singing in the tall grass, a repetitive and droning chorus that seems to lower the temperature of the air. The stars are bright and steady in the sky, looking down like silent guardians over the sleeping farm. The barn in the distance is a dark silhouette against the moonlight, its rafters holding the memories of a century of harvests. Inside the kitchen, the air is thick with a sense of safety and belonging as the kitten finishes its meal and begins to let out a long and sleepy sigh. It curls into a tight and perfect circle of orange fur on the flannel cloth, its breathing becoming slow and regular and deep. Henderson follows the rhythm of that breathing, feeling his own chest rise and fall in a matching cadence of peace. He notices a small crack in the ceiling and follows the line of it with his eyes, a slow and purposeless journey through the architecture of his life. The shadows move slightly as the fire in the stove settles, the wood popping with a soft and muffled sound that is like a period at the end of a long sentence. There is nothing left to do now but exist in this quiet space where the past and the future have no weight. The memory of the war and the noise of the airplane engines is a distant and fading echo, replaced by the purr of a cat and the ticking of a clock. The world is vast and the universe is old, but in this moment, everything is contained within the four walls of the kitchen. He feels a heavy and pleasant drowsiness creeping up from his feet and settling in his limbs like a warm liquid. His eyelids grow heavy, and the light of the lamp becomes a soft and blurry star in the center of the room. Martha has returned to her chair, and the clicking of her needles has slowed to a rhythmic pulse that eventually fades into the silence. They are all moving toward the edge of sleep together, a shared journey into the dark and quiet waters of the night. The house is a fortress against the wind and the cold, a place where everything is in its proper place and everyone is cared for. The kitten's purr is a low and constant vibration that can be felt in the wood of the table and the marrow of the bone. It is a sound of absolute trust and absolute rest that invites the mind to let go of its final thoughts. The thoughts drift away like clouds over the mountains, changing shape and fading into the deep blue of the atmosphere. He is no longer thinking of the truck or the road or the chores for tomorrow, only of the weight of the air and the softness of the flannel. The night is long, and the morning is a distant dream that has not yet begun to form. The trees outside are motionless, their branches reaching toward the moon in a silent and eternal prayer. The fields are drinking in the dew, and the soil is breathing with a slow and ancient rhythm that matches the heart of the farm. Every living thing is slowing down and turning inward, seeking the restoration that only the darkness can provide. Henderson finally closes his eyes, and the darkness is a welcoming and soft presence that wraps around him like a heavy quilt. He is sinking now into the mattress of his own consciousness, moving deeper into the layers of stillness. The ticking of the clock is the last thing he hears, a steady and reliable guide into the world of dreams. The kitten is safe, and the old man is tired, and the story of the day is finally over. Sleep comes with a
Head back against the wall and closes his eyes, listening to the house settle into the night. He can hear the expansion and contraction of the wooden beams as they cool, a series of small and predictable pops that signal the end of the day's labor. The radiator continues its low and droning hum, a sound that is so constant it becomes part of the silence itself. His breathing begins to slow down, matching the pace of the ticking clock on the mantel in the living room. Each tick is a soft and muffled thud that marks the passage of time in a way that feels productive and peaceful. He thinks of the garden outside, lying dormant and quiet under the moonlight, waiting for the slow arrival of spring. The soil is dark and cool, holding the seeds in a deep and dreamless sleep of their own. He feels a sense of profound connection to the land and the animals and the sturdy walls of the home that has sheltered his family for so many years. The kitten has finished its meal and is now beginning to groom its dusty fur with a focused and repetitive motion. The sight of the small tongue moving over the orange coat is a lesson in patience and simplicity. Slowly, the kitten begins to purr, a vibration so deep and low that it feels like the very foundation of the house is humming in sympathy. The purr is a constant and unchanging frequency that lulls the senses into a state of total relaxation. Henderson feels his limbs becoming heavy and slack, as if they were made of the same heavy timber as the farmhouse. He is drifting on the edge of a great and silent ocean, where the waves are only tiny ripples that disappear before they reach the shore. The darkness behind his eyelids is warm and inviting, like the flannel rags in the box. He imagines the stars above Virginia, stretching out in an endless and glittering tapestry, each one a steady and silent witness to the quiet of the night. There is a deep comfort in the realization that the world is continuing its slow and ancient cycle without any need for effort or intervention. The wind outside picks up just enough to rustle the leaves of the apple trees, a soft and papery sound that reminds him of the turning of pages in a very old book. The scent of the evening air drifts in through a small crack in the window, bringing the smell of damp earth and pine needles. It is a clean and fresh scent that clears the mind and the warmth of the stove. The refrigerator hums a low and comforting bass note that provides a solid foundation for the silence of the evening. He thinks of the tractor and the barn and the fields waiting for tomorrow, but those thoughts are like distant clouds drifting away on a slow wind. There is no rush to go anywhere and no task that cannot wait for the morning sun. The universe feels close and intimate, as if the ceiling of the house were part of the sky itself. The crickets outside have reached a steady and droning chorus that matches the frequency of the heart and the mind. The sound is a thick and velvet blanket that covers the valley and the farm and the house. Martha's knitting needles click together with a faint and rhythmic metallic sound, providing a soft and predictable melody. The yarn moves through her fingers like a slow river flowing toward a peaceful sea. The kitten has found a patch of soft rug near the radiator and is curled into a tight and motionless circle. Its tail is tucked neatly against its nose, and its breathing is deep and dreamless. Henderson follows that breathing, feeling his own chest expand and contract in a matching cadence of absolute quietude. The wood in the stove pops once with a muffled and structural sound as it settles into a bed of glowing coals. The scent of the wood smoke is a ghost in the room, a sweet and earthy reminder of the security of the hearth. The darkness of the night is a welcoming and soft presence that has no edges and no weight. He feels himself drifting on the surface of a calm and glassy lake where the water is still and the air is cool and fresh. The thoughts are becoming hazy and colorful, like the patterns on a quilt seen in a dream. He is no longer a man with chores and responsibilities, but a part of the stillness that has taken over the world. The moon is rising over the ridge, casting a milky and silver light that illuminates the path to the porch. The trees are silent, and the birds are tucked away in the eaves, and the world is exactly as it should be. The cycle of the day has come to a full and beautiful close, leaving only the quiet of the night. The clock continues its steady work, ticking away the minutes of a peaceful life where every moment is a gift of silence. The kitten is safe, and the old man is at rest, and the house is a sanctuary of calm. The sleep is coming now, a deep and dark tide that carries the soul into the land of shadows and light. There is nothing left to say and nothing left to do but to let go and to fall into the soft and waiting arms of the night. The memory of the truck is gone, and the cold is forgotten, and the only thing that remains is the warmth and the breath and the peace. Henderson closes his eyes for the final time this evening and allows the darkness to wrap around him like a heavy and comfortable garment. He is sinking now into the depths of a restorative and beautiful slumber. The world is quiet, and the farm is still, and the night is long and good. The kitten, whom they name Rusty, struggles to keep his eyes open, his tiny body fighting a fever while Henderson sits nearby in his rocking chair. The rhythmic motion of the wood against the floorboards creates a steady and comforting creak that sounds like the heartbeat of the old 1954 farmhouse. The kitchen is filled with a soft and hazy light from the single bulb hanging over the table. The air is warm and heavy with the scent of pine and wood smoke and the faint sweetness of dried apples. Henderson watches the orange fur of the small creature as it rises and falls in a shallow and rapid pace. He reaches out with a large and weathered hand to adjust the flannel blanket tucked around the basket. The fabric is soft and worn, having been washed many times in the cool water of the creek. The kitten lets out a tiny and muffled sigh as it settles deeper into the warmth of the radiator. The sound of the wind outside is a low and distant hum as it moves through the bare branches of the oak trees. There is no rush in this room, only the slow passage of seconds marked by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. The tick is deep and resonant and slow, like a heavy stone falling into a still pond. Martha has gone to fetch a bowl of warm water and a soft sponge, moving with a quiet and graceful gait that makes no sound on the linoleum. The house feels large and protective, as if the walls were leaning in to shelter the small life within. The shadows on the wall are long and still, looking like the silhouettes of mountains at dusk. Henderson feels the weight of his own limbs as he sinks further into the cushions of his chair. His breathing begins to slow down to match the rhythm of the rocking chair, moving back and forth in a lazy and eternal circle. The fever in the kitten is a quiet fire that is slowly being quenched by the comfort of the home and the medicine of rest. He thinks of the long road that led here and the way the stars looked over the hills earlier in the evening. They were steady and bright, like tiny lanterns hung in the velvet sky. The kitten finally closes its eyes completely, and the trembling in its limbs begins to fade into a state of total relaxation. The purr that starts in its chest is a vibration so low it is almost invisible, but it fills the silence with an immense sense of safety. The radiator clicks once as the metal expands under the heat, a sound that is familiar and solid and good. Martha returns and places her hand on Henderson's shoulder, her touch light and warm, as they both watch the sleeping Stowaway. The universe feels contained within this square of warmth, away from the cold and the dark of the forest. The fields outside are drinking in the moonlight, and the cattle are asleep in the lee of the barn. demanding meow and begins to lap at the milk, the first sign that he intends to stay in this world. The golden light of the 1954 Virginia dawn filters through the kitchen window in long and dusty beams that illuminate the worn oak table and the vintage canisters on the counter. The air is cool and crisp outside, but inside the kitchen is a pocket of warmth where the wood stove still hums with the softest glow of embers. Henderson sits in his wooden chair, watching the tiny orange kitten find its strength as the rhythmic sound of lapping milk creates a steady and comforting melody in the silence of the morning. The sound is a tiny and liquid, repetitive pulse that seems to synchronize with the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. The world outside is waking up with a slow and deliberate pace, where the mist clings to the valley floor like a soft and white velvet blanket. The Blue Ridge Mountains are etched against a sky of pale lavender and peach, and the birds are starting their first quiet notes of the day. There is no rush to the morning, only the gradual unfolding of light and the steady breathing of the farmhouse. The kitten finishes the saucer and lets out a small and satisfied sigh before beginning to groom its paws with a focused and hypnotic motion. Henderson feels the weight of the night's worry lifting from his heart, like the morning fog rising from the creek. He reaches down with a calloused hand and gently strokes the soft fur on the kitten's head, feeling the heat of life and the vibration of a new and steady purr. The purr is a low and constant frequency that resonates through the floorboards and into the marrow of his bones. It is a sound that speaks of survival and trust and the simple grace of finding a home. The steam from Martha's coffee pot rises in a slow and graceful spiral toward the ceiling, carrying the scent of roasted beans and a hint of chicory. The house settling into its foundation, the kitchen lamp is dimmed to a soft glow that makes the shadows on the wall look like soft mountains. Every muscle in his body becomes slack and heavy as if he were made of the same iron as the old stove. The world is vast and the universe is quiet, and everything is exactly as it should be. The cycle of the community is like the cycle of the seasons, slow and certain and filled with a quiet strength. He lets go of the last thread of the day and allows the darkness to wrap around him like a heavy wool blanket. The memory of the kitten under the truck is now a distant and peaceful thought that brings a smile to his spirit. The night is long and the sleep is deep, and the valley is at rest under the watchful eyes of the stars. There is nothing left to do but breathe and exist in this perfect and silent moment of home. A week later, the kitten is strong enough to explore the farmhouse, turning a ball of yarn into a formidable enemy and bringing laughter to a quiet home. The morning light in 1954 Virginia stretches across the wide pine floorboards in long and lazy streaks of pale gold. Rusty moves with a new and bouncy energy, his small paws making a soft and rhythmic pat-pat-pat sound against the wood that has been polished by generations of Henderson feet. He finds a stray ball of wool yarn beneath Martha's rocking chair, and his eyes widen into perfect dark circles of focus. He crouches low to the ground, his tail twitching in a slow and hypnotic motion that seems to capture the very essence of the quiet morning. With a sudden and tiny leap, he pounces on the yarn, causing it to roll across the floor in a slow and wobbling path. The sound of the wool against the grain of the wood is a soft and shushing noise, like a broom moving over a porch. Henderson sits at the kitchen table holding a heavy ceramic mug of coffee that radiates a steady and grounding warmth into his palms. He watches the kitten with a slow and steady gaze, feeling the stillness of the house wrap around him like a familiar cardigan. The clock on the wall continues its heavy and reliable ticking, a sound that is as certain as the rising sun and the falling rain. Outside the window, the hills are blanketed in a soft and silver mist that clings to the hollows of the valley. The air is perfectly still, and the only movement is the slow drift of a single hawk circling high above the barn. Inside the kitchen, the smell of wood smoke and dried lavender creates a hazy and peaceful atmosphere that invites a deep and effortless breath. Rusty chases the yarn into a corner where the shadows are soft and blurry, and he rolls onto his back with his paws reaching for the air in a display of pure and simple joy. The sound of Henderson's quiet laughter is a low and resonant rumble that vibrates through the room like the gentle purr of a sleeping engine. It is a sound of contentment that has no sharp edges, only the soft curves of a life well lived. Martha moves through the room with a slow and rhythmic gait, her apron strings swaying like a pendulum as she sets a plate of biscuits on the counter. The clink of the china is a small and musical note that hangs in the air before dissolving back into the silence. The kitten eventually tires of his hunt and finds a patch of sun-warmed floor near the radiator to settle down. He begins a slow and methodical grooming process, his tiny tongue moving in a repetitive and soothing pattern over his orange fur. The repetition is mesmerizing to behold, drawing the mind away from the clutter of the world and into the simplicity of the moment. The house seems to breathe along with the kitten, its timber and stone expanding and contracting in a slow and structural sigh. Every object in the room, from the heavy iron skillet to the lace curtains, is settled and at rest. The world beyond the farm is a distant and fading memory, while this kitchen remains an island of absolute tranquility. Henderson feels the heaviness of his limbs as he leans back in his chair, allowing his eyes to follow the dust motes dancing in a beam of light. They move in a slow and purposeless dance, fingers moving with a slow and deliberate gentleness to stroke the orange fur. The kitten begins to purr, a low and constant vibration that acts as a grounding frequency for his thoughts. The purr is a steady hum that feels like the distant vibration of a transformer or the drone of a summer cicada, pulling the mind deeper into a state of relaxation. He closes his eyes, and for a moment, the years blur together where the memory of the dog and the presence of the cat become one single and continuous thread of companionship. The house behind him is silent and safe, its timber holding the stories of many decades within the grain of the wood. The kitchen clock ticks with a muffled and heavy thud that marks the passage of time without any sense of urgency. Every second is a gift of quietude, and every breath is an invitation to let go of the burdens of the day. The scent of the wood smoke from a neighbor's hearth drifts through the air, adding a layer of silver comfort to the atmosphere. The world is vast, and the universe is silent, but in this small patch of the world, everything is settled and whole. The shadows on the lawn grow longer and merge into a single and deep blue shade that covers the clover and the stones. The crickets have begun their nightly symphony, a repetitive and droning chorus that serves as a metronome for the sleeping earth. Henderson feels the tension in his jaw and his shoulders simply dissolve, leaving his body feeling slack and heavy, like a piece of driftwood on a calm and glassy lake. He is floating now on the edge of a deep and restorative slumber, where the thoughts are shapeless and colorful, like the embers of a dying fire. The kitten has fallen asleep on his lap, tucked into a tight and perfect circle of orange and white fur, its breathing so shallow and regular that it becomes a part of the stillness. He mimics that breathing, feeling his own chest rise and fall in a slow and effortless cadence that is as natural as the turning of the tides. The memory of Buster is no longer a source of sadness, but a warm and glowing ember that provides comfort in the dark. The hole in his heart has been filled, not by replacing what was lost, but by growing something new in the space it left behind. The stars are beginning to emerge in the sky, each one a distant and steady point of light that watches over the valley with a quiet and protective gaze. The Milky Way stretches across the heavens like a dusty path leading to a land of dreams where the grass is always green and the sun is always soft. He feels a sense of immense peace in the realization that he is exactly where he is meant to be at this moment in time. The cycle of the day is closing its circle, and the night is taking over the hills and the woods and the farm. The trees are motionless, their branches reaching toward the moon in a silent and eternal prayer of rest. Every living thing on the farm, from the cattle in the barn to the owls in the rafters, is settling into a state of deep and profound quiet. The mind is a calm and empty room where the only sound is the echo of the heart and the rhythm of the breath. The darkness is a welcoming and soft presence that wraps around the porch like a heavy velvet blanket, shielding him from the noise of the outside world. He lets go of the last remnants of the day, the chores and the truck and the road, and allows himself to be carried away by the gentle tide of the night. The rocking chair slows to a stop, but the inner rhythm of peace continues to beat with a steady and sure pulse. The kitten is a warm and living weight that reminds him of the beauty of a second chance and the power of a small rescue. He is sinking now into the soft and dark layers of sleep where the colors are muted and the sounds are only whispers. The journey of the heart is a long one, but tonight it has found a place to rest among the shadows of the Virginia mountains. The morning will come with its own light and its own tasks, but for now there is only the silence and the purr and the
Marking the hours with a soft and silent grace, the scent of the baking bread begins to fill the air, a warm and yeasty aroma that signifies safety and abundance. He thinks of the many Sundays that have passed in this house and the many more that will come, each one a bead on a long and beautiful string of time. The mind is a calm and empty room where the only sound is the echo of the heart and the slow vibration of the purring cat. Rusty has now curled into a tight and motionless circle of orange fur, his breathing deep and regular and effortless. Henderson mimics that pace, feeling his own chest rise and fall in a matching cadence of tranquility. The universe is vast, and the stars are waiting, but here in this farmhouse there is only the warmth and the light in the silence. The mind is free to let go of the day and wander into the soft and dark woods of a dream. The journey of the baking is over, and the journey of the rest has begun. Everything is exactly as it should be, and the soul is at rest in the heart of the country. The light on the wall shifts even more slowly now as the afternoon begins its long and graceful decline toward evening. The peace is absolute, and the world is quiet, and the sleep is coming with a gentle and unstoppable force. By midwinter, Rusty has taken it upon himself to guard the birdhouse and chase away the squirrels, acting as the self-appointed king of the Henderson estate. The world outside the farmhouse is wrapped in a thick and silent blanket of white snow that muffles every sound of the valley. The trees stand like silver sculptures against a sky the color of a dove's wing. Inside the house, the air is heavy with the scent of dried cedar and the low, steady warmth of the wood-burning stove. Henderson sits by the window in his high-backed chair, watching the orange cat sit motionless on the porch as a sentinel of the winter morning. Rusty's fur is thick and lush now, glowing against the stark white of the frost-covered railing. He watches a gray squirrel scamper across the frozen garden with a slow and rhythmic twitch of his tail that mimics the ticking of the clock on the mantel. The ticking is a deep and resonant sound that anchors the room in a state of perpetual calm. There is no hurry in the movement of the clouds above the Blue Ridge Mountains as they drift in a slow and purposeless parade of gray and charcoal. Henderson feels the weight of his limbs becoming slack and heavy as he breathes in the stillness of the afternoon. The heat from the radiator creates a faint and hypnotic hiss as it moves through the old iron pipes, a sound that has lulled this family to sleep for many decades. Every few minutes, a soft clump of snow falls from the roof of the barn, hitting the ground with a muffled and grounding thud that only emphasizes the silence. Martha is in the parlor, her knitting needles creating a steady and rhythmic clicking that sounds like the gentle rain on a tin roof. The yarn is a soft navy blue, flowing through her fingers like a quiet river moving toward a peaceful sea. The kitten, now a sturdy cat, decides his patrol is finished for the hour and pushes through the small cat door with a light and musical jingle of his collar. He walks across the wide pine floorboards with her side a small and pulsing warmth that seems to be the very heart of the room. Henderson kneels before the cast-iron wood stove, his movements deliberate and calm as he opens the heavy door with a metallic creak that resonates through the stillness.
He lays the seasoned oak logs onto the dying embers and watches as the small orange sparks fly upward in a slow and graceful spiral. The fire catches with a soft and rhythmic crackle that provides the only music for the evening. The heat begins to radiate outward in slow and invisible waves, touching the skin with a gentle and persistent warmth that pushes back the encroaching chill of the blizzard. The house is settling now, with the occasional and predictable groan of the timber as it adjusts to the weight of the snow on the roof. It is a sound of structural endurance and safety that makes the inside feel even more like a sanctuary. Henderson sits in his rocking chair and begins the slow and steady motion of back and forth, back and forth. The rhythm of the chair is a pendulum that lulls the mind into a state of total tranquility where the passage of time is measured only by the steady pulse of the fire. The shadows on the ceiling are long and soft, moving in a lazy and synchronized dance with the flames. Outside, the wind continues its steady drone, a repetitive and white noise that acts as a barrier between the family and the rest of the world. There is a profound sense of isolation that is not lonely, but rather a deep and focused belonging to this specific moment in this specific place. He thinks about the fragility of the world and how a simple storm can stop the machines and the noise of modern life, leaving only the breath and the warmth and the spirit. Martha's breathing is slow and regular, matching the pace of the ticking clock on the mantel, which continues its work without the need for wires or light. Each tick is a muffled and heavy thud that sounds like a heartbeat in the dark. The kitten lets out a long and sleepy sigh, shifting its weight against the blanket and beginning a low-frequency purr that vibrates through the fabric and into the air. The purr is a constant and unchanging note that serves as a foundation for the silence of the room. Henderson feels his own eyelids becoming heavy and slack as the tension of the day dissolves into the amber light. He follows the movement of a single snowflake caught in a crack of the window pane, watching as it slowly melts into a tiny and silver droplet of water. The world is moving at a different speed now, a speed that allows for reflection and the letting go of all worries. The memory of the truck and the road and the town is a distant and hazy echo that has no power over the stillness of the hearth. He is floating on a calm and dark lake where the water is still and the air is fresh, and the only task is to exist in the quietude. The wood in the stove pops with a soft and muffled sound, like a whisper in the night, signaling that the house is well guarded and warm. The scent of the wood smoke is a thin and silver thread that weaves through the air, bringing a sense of ancient security to the soul. Every muscle in his body is relaxed and heavy, sinking into the chair as if he were part of the farmhouse itself. The darkness outside is vast and absolute, but inside there is a golden glow that covers everything in a mantle of peace. The stars are hidden behind the clouds, but he knows they are there, steady and silent in their eternal watch over the hills. The mind is a calm and empty space where the thoughts are like soft clouds drifting over a summer meadow in the late afternoon. He is sinking now into the soft and restorative layers of sleep, where the colors are muted and the sounds are only shadows of themselves. The journey of the storm is a background melody to the journey of the rest. The house is a fortress of warmth, and the kitten is a beacon of life, and the night is a long and beautiful corridor leading toward a dreamless slumber. He lets out one final and deep breath and allows the darkness to wrap around him like a heavy and comfortable quilt. The valley is white, and the house is dark, and the sleep is deep and good. Rusty spends the entire storm curled at Martha's feet, his constant purring providing a rhythm of peace while the weight of the snow on the roof is a silent and heavy pressure that only adds to the feeling of being tucked away and safe from the passage of the hours. Henderson feels himself sinking deeper into the cushions of his chair, as if he were being absorbed by the very fabric of the home. His eyes finally close, and the image of the fire remains behind his eyelids as a soft and glowing coal that provides a lingering sense of warmth. The universe is vast, and the storm is powerful, but in this parlor there is only the breath and the purr and the stillness. The mind is free to let go of the last remnants of the day and wander into the dark and quiet woods of a restorative sleep. The journey of the storm is a background hum to the journey of the rest, where time has no meaning and the heart is always at home. The night is a long and gentle corridor leading toward a dreamless state of being where the only reality is the peace of the present moment. The light from the stove eventually fades to a dull and comforting red, and the house falls into a deep and profound quietude that covers the valley and the farm like a mantle of velvet. The sleep is coming now, with a slow and unstoppable grace, carrying the man and the woman and the cat into the silent waters of the night. During the cold snap, Henderson trips in the dark. It is Rusty's persistent scratching at the bedroom door that alerts Martha to come help him up. The night is incredibly still, and the air inside the farmhouse carries a sharp and crisp edge that speaks of the deep winter freezing the Virginia soil outside. The power has been out for hours, leaving the hallways in a state of absolute and velvet darkness, where the only guide is the memory of the floorboards underfoot. Henderson had risen to check the wood stove, his movements slow and careful as he navigated the familiar path toward the kitchen. In the heavy silence, his boot caught on the corner of the rug, and he found himself sitting abruptly on the cold pine floor, his breath coming in a short and surprised puff of white mist. He is not hurt, but the weight of the years makes the act of standing back up feel like a mountain to climb in the pitch black. Near the bedroom door, Rusty has been watching with wide and glowing eyes, his orange fur a dim shadow against the dark paneling. The cat senses the change in the rhythm of the house and begins a steady and rhythmic scratching against the wood of the door, a sound that is repetitive and focused and soft. It is a sound like a dry leaf skittering across a porch or a needle moving across a record in the quiet space between songs. Inside the room, Martha stirs from a deep and peaceful slumber, her mind rising slowly through layers of warmth and dreams of summer orchards. She hears the persistent and gentle scratch, scratch, scratch of the cat's claws, a sound so deliberate that it cuts through the heavy fog of sleep. She sits up, and the blankets rustle with a soft and shushing noise, like the wind in the pines. She reaches for the flashlight on the nightstand, and the click of the switch is a sharp and satisfying sound that breaks the stillness. The beam of light is a solid and dusty pillar that cuts through the dark, showing the way to the hallway where Henderson is waiting in the quiet. She helps him up with a slow and steady hand, her strength a calm and reliable force that has anchored this home for 40 years. They walk back toward the kitchen together, their footsteps creating a rhythmic and grounding thud, thud, thud on the sturdy wood. Rusty follows them, his tail held high in a graceful and upright arc, his presence a silent and loyal sentinel in the night. They reach the wood stove, and Henderson opens the iron door with a low and metallic groan that signifies the endurance of the house. The orange glow of the embers spills out onto the floor, casting long and dancing shadows that move in a lazy and hypnotic synchronization. He adds a fresh log of oak, and the rescue is the rescuer, and the sleep is deep and restorative and perfect. The story explores the deep, unspoken understanding between an old man who has seen too much war and a cat who was saved from a cold machine. Henderson sits in his heavy mahogany rocker as the evening light in 1954 Virginia turns to a soft and dusty rose color. The silence of the afternoon is deep and resonant, like the inside of a vast and ancient bell that has just stopped ringing. He looks down at his hands, which are scarred and steady, and he remembers the thunder of engines and the cold steel of the planes he once maintained in the heat of a distant conflict. Those years were filled with a noise so loud it seemed to settle into the very marrow of his bones. But now there is only the rhythmic creak of the porch floorboards moving under his weight. The sound is a slow and predictable groan that anchors him to the present moment in the solid earth of his farm. Curled atop his knee is Rusty, the orange cat who once lived in the dark and oily shadows of a truck chassis. They are two souls who have found a mutual language of stillness and safety. The cat's purr is a low and constant vibration that acts as a grounding frequency for Henderson's wandering thoughts. It is a sound like the distant hum of a honeybee or the rhythmic splashing of a small creek over smooth river stones. The air is thick with the scent of damp clover and ripening apples, and the faint, cool breath of the mountains as they prepare for the night. Henderson watches a single firefly blink in the tall grass near the fence line, its tiny light a rhythmic and pulsing green that matches the slow pace of his own breathing. He feels the tension of decades of memories simply dissolving into the amber light of the sunset. There is no need for words between the man and the cat because they both understand the value of a quiet room and a warm hearth. The world outside the farm is moving fast, with new machines and loud voices, but here, the clock on the mantel ticks with a heavy and muffled thud that marks the passage of a gentler time. Each tick is a soft and grounding beat that reminds him that he is home and he is safe. He thinks of the way the kitten felt when he first pulled him from the cold iron of the truck, so small and fragile, yet possessing a will to endure that matched his own. They have both seen the harder edges of the world and have decided to spend the rest of their days in the softness of the shadows. The mountains are now mere silhouettes against a sky of deep indigo and violet, looking like sleeping giants guarding the edge of the valley. The wind chimes on the porch move just enough to create a single and silver note that hangs in the air before fading into the silence. It is a sound of absolute peace and completion. Martha is inside the house, her footsteps a soft and rhythmic shushing on the linoleum as she closes the cupboards for the night. The sound of the world narrowing down to these few rooms and this one porch is a comfort that weighs pleasantly on Henderson's eyelids. He feels his muscles becoming slack and heavy, as if he were sinking into the very timber of the chair. The memory of the war is a fading photograph, washed out by the golden light of the present, where the only reality is the warmth of the cat and the scent of the pine trees. Rusty shifts his weight and lets out a long and sleepy sigh, tucking his nose under a velvet paw and settling into a deeper state of rest. Henderson follows him, moving his mind toward a place where there are no schedules and no noise, only the eternal and slow rotation of the stars. The Milky Way is beginning to appear as a dusty path across the heavens, leading to a land of quiet dreams and soft light. Every blade of grass in the meadow is still, and every bird is tucked away in the eaves of the barn, waiting for the sun to return in its own time. There is a profound sense of belonging in the realization that the earth is solid and the night is kind. The darkness is not an empty space, but a heavy and soft blanket that covers the soul and prepares it for restoration. He breathes in the cooling air and feels his heart beating in a slow and steady synchronicity with the cat and the house in the valley. The rhythm is a lullaby that has wool blanket pulled up to the chin on a cold night. Henderson feels his own breathing slowing down to match the rhythm of the cat and the cooling engine, creating a symphony of quietude that lulls the mind. The memories of the road and the town and the fields are all merging into a single and peaceful tapestry of a life well lived. The movement of the clouds above is so slow it is almost imperceptible as they drift in a sea of pale violet and soft peach. There's no hurry to the day and no demand on the spirit, only the simple act of being present in this quiet pocket of time. He eventually turns the key and the engine wakes with a soft and familiar rumble that feels like a greeting. They drive back toward the farmhouse, the shadows of the trees stretching out to touch the middle of the road in a silent and lengthening dance. The rhythm of the truck is a lullaby that carries them home across the rolling hills where the cattle are already settling down for the night. The world is vast, but their world is small and safe and filled with the light of 1,000 quiet mercies. As they pull into the driveway, the gravel crunches with a grounding and repetitive sound that marks the end of the excursion. The house stands waiting, with its porch light glowing like a soft and steady star in the gathering twilight. Inside, the warmth and the silence are waiting to wrap around them and carry them toward the edge of sleep. The story ends with a peaceful evening on the porch. Henderson looks at the truck, then at the cat, realizing that while he saved Rusty's life, Rusty may have saved his. The evening air in Virginia is a soft and velvet touch against the skin, carrying the scent of drying hay and the cool dampness of the approaching night. The old 1951 Chevy sits in the driveway, its chrome grille catching the last golden glimmers of the sun, like a fading memory of the day's work. The engine is completely silent now, having settled into a deep and metallic rest after the miles of travel. Henderson sits in his favorite cedar rocking chair,
and the wood emits a slow and rhythmic creak that feels like a steady pulse in the quietude of the farm. Back and forth the chair moves in a hypnotic and lazy arc that draws the mind away from the noise of the world and into the stillness of the heart. On the wide armrest of the chair, Rusty has stretched out his long orange body, his fur looking like liquid copper in the twilight. The cat's eyes are closed, and his breathing is a deep and regular rise and fall that serves as a visual metronome for the peace of the porch. A low and constant purr vibrates through the wood of the chair and into Henderson's arm, a frequency so steady and grounding that it seems to harmonize with the very rotation of the earth. He looks at the truck and remembers the day he found the small, shivering creature tucked away in the cold iron of the chassis, and he marvels at how such a tiny life could fill the vast silence left by the wars in